Sukuna's just taken down Maki. Though she put up a good fight, she was eventually taken down by a black flash that knocks her out of the fight for a while. Yuta has just had his domain split in half alongside his torso. Yuji and Choso are currently out of the fight, needing time to recover with RCT. So who is left? Higuruma's been taken down. Kashimo's been turned into mincemeat. Who is the last bastion to buy some time to allow our Anti Sukuna Squad to recover? The strongest grade 1 sorcerer, Atsuya Kusakabe. And he, alone, is the only sorcerer left to fight the King of Curses. Kusakabe versus the King. Chapter 254 is my favourite in the entire series, more so than Chapter 221, the release of Gojo, more so than Chapter 198, when we see Naoya's domain. I love it even more than all of the chapters showing us Gojo and Sukuna's generational battle. I'm obviously biased, and this is clearly very subjective. However, lend me some of your time and let me explain to you why this chapter is so highly rated and why I think you should like it more too. To do this, I'm going to have to give you a little bit of context of who Kusakabe is, because you might have forgotten. So bear with this rapid fire history lesson really quick. Atsuya Kusakabe, grade 1 sorcerer. He first appears to us during the Shibuya incident. He's introduced to us with Panda next to him. We see him when each team enters the curtain surrounding Shibuya. Throughout the incident, however, Kusakabe lures Panda around empty areas to avoid as much conflict as possible, only to then be interrupted by the remnants of Geto's family. He is then again interrupted by the fight between Sukuna and Jogo. Kusakabe survives the impact of Maximum Meteor, more than likely due to his simple domain. And after surviving this attack and being found by Panda, Kusakabe says he thinks that Yuji should be executed, and given the destruction around him, pretty based, this makes sense, okay? After this, he then proceeds to save the entire Kyoto school by parrying Kenjaku's Mahito-infused Maximum Uzumaki, which is absolutely cracked. He then gets frozen by Uraume, and ironically enough, he kind of just gets left on ice for a good 100 chapters or so, only showing back up during the pre-Shinjuku training and throughout the commentary of the showdown itself between Gojo and Sukuna. During these moments of commentary during the Shinjuku showdown, Kusakabe is clearly portrayed to have a much more grounded and knowledgeable take on this battle, at least more so when compared to the rest of the cast. Then, however, after Gojo's demise, he appears on the battlefield as a part of the Anti Sukuna Squad. But before his 1v1, he does have some notable moments. He saves Higuruma's life from the king himself, shielding him from slashes after Higuruma's domain expansion gives him the Executioner's Sword. Kusakabe then speculates about Sukuna's use of the flame arrow and whether or not he can use it, because if he does, everyone on this battlefield is toast. Then we cut a little bit further to Yuta's domain and we see Ino and Kusakabe talking, and Ino gasses him up a little bit, which is pretty cool. Then Maki rushes in and Yuta's barrier falls apart. Well, he takes it down himself, but you understand what I'm saying. All of these moments lead us to this fight, this chapter. The entire series just shows us possible glimpses of how strong Kusakabe is, as well as statements referring to his possible strength, alluded to via his title as a grade 1 sorcerer. All these things eventually culminate into taking us into this specific chapter. Chapter 253, one chapter before the real Shinjuku Showdown starts. This chapter starts off with one of the most heavily debated things about Kusakabe. We get statements from Meimei, Nanami, and Gojo respectively, all three of them agreeing to some degree that Kusakabe is more than likely the strongest grade 1 sorcerer. Kusakabe himself disagreeing with their assessments, but he also kind of insults Usami at the same time by saying he himself isn't the strongest, but neither is Usami. So chances are this dude is fodder, so it makes sense why Gojo hates this guy. We then see what happens after Yuta's domain is taken down, seeing Maki's own battle with Sukuna, with assistance from our man Kusakabe as well as the goat Ino, in combination with the 7-3 sword, or so we think on the surface, until we see Kusakabe wield said 7-3 sword, but unfortunately not much comes of it. But it is pretty cool to see Kusakabe using this cursed tool. Sukuna's fight with Maki then rages on until the King of Curses lands a black flash and takes Maki out of the fight for a while. One man stands alone in front of Sukuna, the strongest sorcerer in history versus the strongest sorcerer available. Chapter 253 ends with a simple question. Me versus Sukuna? Wait, for real? However, another question arises from this statement. Are you subscribed? If you want more Kusakabe content, why not? And hey, why not become a member as well? I'll make even more Kusakabe videos if you do. Speaking of Kusakabe, Chapter 254 wastes no time. Kusakabe opens a simple domain. Shocker, we did not expect this. Sukuna himself internally questions the logic behind this choice. I mean, what use is this simple domain against someone who can throw slashes in the air? Kusakabe thinks to himself, however, that he can negate the sure hit effect of Sukuna's slashes though he can't fully negate the slashes themselves. However, his domain, as simple as it may be, is still a domain. His cursed energy output will increase as a result of it, and Sukuna's slashes will weaken. We see him calmly react to and parry Sukuna's slashes. Sukuna even complements his reaction time during this feat of speed. Though Sukuna at this point clearly lacks interest in the Grade 1 sorcerer, he doesn't have the same interest and fascination that he did with the previous sorcerers that opposed him, like he did with Higuruma, Maki, Gojo. He doesn't have the same smirk on his face now. He seems kind of bored. However, despite Sukuna thinking that he has a perfect grasp on Kusakabe's power level and his skill set, one thing stands out to us, the audience. Kusakabe's simple domain. It's very unique. Anything that enters his domain, be it a sorcerer or a technique, he can react to it automatically. And on top of that, he can read Sukuna's slashes through observing his movements and cursed energy. This makes sense as we saw this explained during the fight between Yuji and Yuta post Shibuya. This internal monologue is quickly interrupted, however, as a slash races towards Kusakabe. No move it telegraphing its appearance, but thanks to Kusakabe's simple domain, he is able to deflect it behind him. Sukuna, the smug bitch that he is, taunts Kusakabe. The slash that bisected Gojo, eviscerated Kashimo, and forcibly amputated Higuruma, and almost doomed Yuta to death instantly, it's coming up next. And Kusakabe knows this. We then flash back again to our trio of veterans, discussing Kusakabe some more. Nanami saying that despite him not being able to see Kusakabe winning, he can't see him losing either. Mei gives a similar affirmation. Both her raw strength and Nanami's are more than likely above Kusakabe's. However, that's not what makes him so formidable. His variety of techniques, his knowledge, and his analytical mind, he is a Swiss army knife in the form of a sorcerer who doesn't even have a cursed technique. Gojo himself adds to this, stating that his simple domain is his ace in the hole. Beginners usually have to make some sort of binding vow just so they can use a simple domain. The example we are given here being Miwa having to plant her feet for a simple domain, whilst Kusakabe can use his freely. He expands his domain to reach Sukuna. He has been forced into Kusakabe's domain. In doing so, our hero prevents Sukuna from charging up his cursed energy, meaning that he cannot launch the World Cutting Slash. We're then met with another flash of Mei. The new Shadow style's Bato, or sword draw, is usually used as a counterattack, and that makes sense, as we see with Miwa versus Maki during the Goodwill event. It's a counterattack, but Kusakabe can move with his domain and expand its range at the same time. We get a glimpse of this during him fighting off Geto's family in Shibuya. And on top of that, given how Kusakabe can also intercept and react to anything or anyone that has entered or been forced into his own domain, it's fair to say that Kusakabe's simple domain is in a different grade to that of other sorcerers. Mei ends her thoughts on Kusakabe in a pretty succinct way that perfectly encapsulates one of the main reasons I personally love Kusakabe so much. This is the TCB and not the Viz translation, so there may be some slight wording differences. An individual capable of achieving grade 1 sorcery with not cursed technique attacks, not with their brain, but with their spine, they are not to be taken lightly. Ooh, I like that. Our eyes then met with beauty. Kusakabe dashes towards this king. His domain, though simple, when in combination with Kusakabe's prowess, proves impressive. This is shown to us through him slashing at Sukuna himself and drawing blood, a feat that Jogo himself wasn't capable of. Kusakabe, knowing he is one of the last people left with enough strength to fight this curse-given humanoid form, he pushes onwards. I don't know of a single person who can evade that, although there is one who wouldn't need to. Nanami's words have run true. However, Sukuna is on a black flash high. His wounds are healing as fast as they were given, and from either the strength of Sukuna's body alone or another slash we don't really see. Kusakabe's sword, a tool capable of deflecting the king's slashes multiple times, this blade snaps. Kusakabe uses his iconic trench coat as a diversion. He covers the face of history's strongest with a coat. Though the king quickly cuts the coat in half, Kusakabe begins his onslaught, not needing his weapon in hand. He kicks Sukuna through roads around Shinjuku and chases him down in a similar fashion to Sukuna himself when he sprinted towards Higuruma. Though Sukuna initially seemed bored and uninterested by this grade 1 sorcerer, the strongest grade 1, a wide grin now appears on Sukuna's face as Kusakabe charges him. Meanwhile, our hero here questions the motivation behind his actions. Why is he trying so hard to fight a battle he knows he cannot win? his debt. He owes Yaga so much more than he can repay. Though Kusakabe knows that it doesn't really matter. Yaga's dead anyway, so he can't really chew him out for not going all out against the strongest sorcerer that history has ever known. But that's why he has to go all out. No matter how Kusakabe fought here, or even if he didn't, Yaga would still allow him to see his nephew and his sister happy together. Yaga would also be saddened by the fact that he and Kusakabe wouldn't be fighting together. We flash again to our veterans giving their testimonies on Kusakabe's abilities for the final time. The biggest reason I picked Kusakabe though, despite his constant complaining, no one can deny his intellectual integrity. Put simply, he's a kind man. He's the kind of man who kicks some ass. Oh, that's cheesy. We see him dodge through Sukuna's slashes in a pose that the fandomly consistently compares to Gojo's Honored One pose. Kusakabe does this whilst thinking about all the students that came into this battle and gave their all before him. These kids gave it everything. What kind of adult would he be if he did not do the same? He then uses a facet of the new Shadow style that we hadn't seen before, recreating the blade of his broken sword with the new Shadow style Moonlight Veil. He rushes towards Sukuna and attempts to plunge this sword, this cursed energy-powered blade, into the King of Curses' chest. But Sukuna knew he would attempt such a thing. I mean, it's his biggest weak point. Since the surprise attack from Maki pierced his heart, he's been beating his heart manually with cursed energy alone. The two fighters chuckle at how obvious this attack was. And then we cut to the strongest grade 1 lying on the ground, slashes adorning his chest, arms splayed wide. Ui, or Wee, however you want to pronounce it, attempts to recover Kusakabe so he can be treated immediately away from the battlefield. But Sukuna, of course, predicts that this fledgling sorcerer would appear again, as he has throughout the course of this battle, and Sukuna attempts to get rid of this annoyance, but he misses. Wee is saved by a familiar face. Miguel appears on the scene. He appears after being missing since his brief appearance during the Perfect Preparation arc, and not even being relevant since JJK 0, and he is of course another one of my personal favourite characters, and he shows up to save the day. And thus the chapter ends with Miguel insulting Sukuna for not knowing who he is. The man who went toe to toe with Gojo comes out of the woodwork, and with that, chapter 254 comes to a close. That was pretty much a synopsis of the chapter itself in a literal sense, but why does this battle between a techniqueless sorcerer and the strongest sorcerer in history fascinate me so much? Despite the fact that we all knew how this chapter would end pretty much, with Kusakabe losing, maybe some people thought he would die, but of course, my goat was never going to die. We all collectively hoped that Kusakabe would at least make a show of it, that he would give it his all and make us remember his name. And he did just that. Granted, I'm not gonna lie, I prefer how Nandri, the dude who drew all the fake leaks when the weekly JJK chapters were coming out, I much prefer his portrayal of what could have happened, where Kusakabe hits a black flash. That would have been sick, but obviously this chapter is still great to me either way. And the fandom agreed somewhat around the time of this chapter's release. I mean, Kusakabe Kaisen was real for a few weeks. We had the strongest sorcerer available versus a sorcerer god, and we were hyped to see what would happen. This chapter as a whole perfectly highlights my love for Kusakabe as a character. He complains all the time, portrays himself as self-serving, and he wants to avoid conflict as much as possible. However, just like in Shibuya with Maximum Uzumaki, we see Kusakabe step up to the plate and do what is right, and these veteran sorcerers agree that at his core, he is a truly kind man. In spite of his lack of innate technique, he manages to do more damage to the strongest sorcerer in the series. He did more damage to him than Jogo did, last longer than Kashimo, and prevent the world cutting slash from even coming out. Kusakabe conveys in this chapter how impressive he can truly be. This 1v1, this inevitable loss, he still gives it his all in the end. And funnily enough, the chapter ends in a similar way to Gojo's death. The main focus of both chapters, being Kusakabe and Gojo in their respective chapters, they both get somewhat off-screened by the King of Curses. Whilst the Anti Sukuna Squad arc in JJK is not the best arc of the series in my opinion, and let's be real, it's overall one of the weaker parts, feel free to tell me that I'm wrong below, I feel like this specific moment, this chapter was the highlight of it all for me. It did what it set out to do perfectly. It included two of my favourite characters in the entire series, and it gave my main man Kusakabe a real time to shine so brightly that a lot more people in the fandom grew to care for his character almost as much as I do. Overall, this chapter is perfect. This chapter in which Kusakabe fought the king. P.S. Little side note, why didn't Kusakabe use the 7-3 sword in this fight? Like, we see it later on that Ino uses it against Sukuna again, just after Ino uses Ryu, but it just seems kind of weird. Like, it was the perfect opportunity for Kusakabe to use it here, during Kusakabe's fight with Sukuna, because it would have just done more damage, hypothetically. I mean, we see that Kusakabe can use the curse technique of the 7-3 sword, which is pretty cool as well. Like, it's not really a big deal, but it just would have been cool to see when Nanami is talking about Kusakabe, and then it could have, like, suddenly cut to him using Nanami's sword. But, what can you do? The chapter is still a 10 out of 10 for me. But let me know your thoughts on this chapter below.